Here.
Mr. Martin?
Here.
Mr. Skorzinski?
Here.
Mr. Cronin?
Here.
Mr. Jennings?
Here.
Mr. Sitorius?
We're going to start right off with our audit with Mr. David Myers.
Mr. Myers from Warner Rogers is here to talk with you. I don't. You can feel free to use the podium if you'd like to, or
Comfortable right here.
okay. There you go.
If you're okay with that. Well, thanks for having me out this evening. Appreciate that. Our staff came out to do an audit of your financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2015. And I realize it's now October. Everything got done on time, and some of the information that you see tonight was also reported in a special report to the State Board of Education in their format, and it was submitted before the October 15th deadline, so you're all set. One of the things I like to point out about an audit is that we don't look at every single transaction. We do a test. There's some areas we focus on that are high risk, but we don't look at every single item. Now, you're required to maintain financial records, and we audit those records, and then we assist you in preparing your financial statements. And so a lot of these numbers should be very familiar to you because you're maintaining your books on the cash basis. And so treasurer's reports, etc. These are the same numbers you've been seeing all along, and now they're all added together in one booklet. I'll go through some of the pages in the financial statements. I'm not going to go through every single one. And one thing you may notice right off the start, if you look at the table of contents, is you've got 66 pages now this year.
And you're in the annual financial report.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes. The annual financial report's got a plastic foam along the edge. And again, 66 pages, and last year we only had 58. So you got a bonus of 8 extra pages this year. You had some new
Thank you.
some new disclosures that were required, and so that added quite a bit more to the financial statements. The independent auditor's report appears on pages 1 through 3, and you'll see that our letterhead is on page 1, and it goes out for 3 pages, but the basics of this is that we're giving an opinion on your cash basis statements and saying that you've reported those accurately. So that's kind of the, boiling it down to basically 2 sentences there instead of 3 pages. But these are all, this is the way the auditor's report has to get laid out. I'm going to move forward to page 4 and 5. And this is called the statement of assets and other debits, liabilities, and fund equity and other credits. One question, absolutely.
Page 2.
Page 2.
Adverse opinion on U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. Is that something that a lot of school districts that keep their books on a cash basis have in their financial?
Absolutely. Just briefly, the auditing standards require us to audit your records on a basis consistent with generally accepted accounting principles. Well, you're maintaining your records on the cash basis in accordance with the State Board of Education requirements, which is perfectly fine. But being that as it is, we have to point that out in our auditor's report that you didn't maintain your records on the basis of generally accepted accounting principles. And what that would entail is a lot more work on your part to record amounts receivable at the end of the year, amounts that are owed to the district, payable amounts, and it would entail a lot more information that would go into the book that really for school districts doesn't really mean a lot. The cash basis is a perfect way to keep your books, but we have to point that out in our auditor's report.
For example, teachers' salaries that are paid in July and August, they were earned in the prior year. So according to the generally accepted principles, they want you to report those as being owed as of June 30th, whereas cash basis we pay when we actually issue the paycheck in July.
Right, I just want to make sure that we're getting this because we keep our books on the cash basis.
Correct.
Rather than the accrual basis, and that there's no other reason for this opinion.
Correct. Moving forward to page 4 and 5, this is at June 30th, 2015. This is where each fund stood. And you can see the grand total all the way in the far column on the right there on page 5 shows total assets of $214 million, total liabilities of $78 million, and total equity, if you will, of $248 million. If you look at the cash and investments up top, you've got about $25 million of cash and investments. So that's what you had at June 30th, 2015. I'm going to move forward to page 6 and 7, and you see this is the receipts and disbursements during the year. And the total receipts for the year were $43.8 million. Total expenditures were $44.5. If you look at the Ed Fund, that had obviously the most, almost $31 million in revenues and $32.1 million in expenses. And you see there's a line item there called state on behalf payments. It's like the bottom line of the revenues, and it's also the bottom line in the expenditures. That's money that the state of Illinois is putting into the teacher's retirement system on behalf of your teachers. You don't actually see that money. That money doesn't actually come to you, and you don't actually spend that money, but it's required to be reported because they're doing it on behalf of your teachers.
Is that the amount that the state wants to pass on to us?
Well, there's been talk of that. I don't know where that is going to end up, but yes, there's been talk of trying to pass some of those teachers' retirement costs back to the local level.
Right, so when they talk about that, they talk about passing on some percentage or all of that, that's the number you want.
And I've been told that the number that they want to pass on to us represents the current cost of what they owe, not what they owe for previous pension bonds or what they've kind of kicked down the road, so to say. So does this number represent just the current on behalf, or does it also represent the back?
Well, that's a great question. What they had been doing in prior years was basing the on behalf on the most recent percentage that they thought you needed to, or that they thought needed to get put in for the current year. This year they did an actuarial methodology to it to come up with this amount, and I'm not sure exactly all the components that are involved in it, but this number came directly from TRS. You were told this is your amount, and it's your share of the statewide amount based on the contributions that you made during the year. You can see the ending fund balance of the education fund was $3.5 million, and if you take that as a percentage of your expenses, and let's take the on behalf out because you don't really spend that money. This shows you have about 2 months roughly of operating monies, fund balance in your Ed fund to operate for the upcoming 2 months. Now you still have a lot of property taxes to collect and a lot of state grants that come in as well. But this is where you stood at the end. And you can see at the bottom, just above the line fund balance deficit beginning of the year, you've got the excess deficiency of receipts and other sources, over disbursements and other uses. And you can see many of the funds were in a negative for the year. So you did spend more than you took in the Ed fund by $1.1 million, in operation and maintenance by $286,000. Transportation was down $74,000, and then the tort fund, all the way over there on page 7, the tort fund was down nearly $800,000 for the year. So district-wide, you were down $484,000. So that was spending in excess of inflows for the year. The next couple pages are details of revenues. This is in the format that the State Board of Education likes to see it in. And then you go to each fund, their expenditures, by object, along with the total budget for each function. Those go on for several pages. Some of that same information will be in the back of the book, but in a little more detail. And you get to the notes to the financial statements. I'm not gonna go through each note. There's notes in here about cash, investments, capital assets, the pension funds, the IRF and TRS. I will stop at one page, on page 39. You've got a note there on page 39 in the middle of the page. It's note 8, general long-term debt. And it just kind of gives you a recap of your bonds that are outstanding. So you've got 7 bond issues, a total of $77.5 million to be paid off. And you can see the table at the very bottom. Your payments all the way through fiscal year 2030. So you'll pay off $77.5 million in principal and $43 million in interest. So a total of $120 million is going to be paid out of your bond and interest fund through the year 2030. I'm going to skip back now to page 47 and 48. And here you'll find this is the education fund. And it shows budget and actual. So what did you budget and what actually happened? So I'm on page 47. You start out with revenues. You can see what the budgeted revenues were. On the top of 48, here's that on behalf payments again. You can see the actual was $7.3 million and the budget was $3 million. So they did change the way, again, like I said before, they changed the way they calculated that. So it kind of looks like you had a great year for on behalf payment revenues, but you'll see later on you also had that same amount in expenditures. In fact, we can go to the end of the educational fund, which appears on page 53. And again, these are the same amounts that you saw up front, but now this is all the detail of the revenues and the detail of the expenses. And on page 53, again, you see that on behalf payments cause you to go over budget in total for the fund, when really you were under budget on the cash purchase price if you don't take that on behalf into account. There's schedules here for each of the other funds, the detail. They go on for several pages. I'm going to take a quick stop near the back of the book on page 65. And on 65, you've got your schedule of assessed valuations, the tax rates, extensions, and collections, and legal debt margin. And you can see 2014 up the very top. I'm on page 65, all the way near the back of the book now. The assessed valuation actually went up in 2014. So you had been going down. The value of the property of the district has been going down since 2009, and in 2014 this is the first time we had an uptick since 2009. And you can see how much you're levying there, a total of $22 million for 2014, and you had collected $5 million as of June 30th. But you can see your collections are usually right around 100%.
What do they base that uptick on? Because around here, nothing's selling.
Well, it would be the summation of each of the townships, and I know that some of the other districts, they went down for the year, but I've talked to some of them where they know it's going to go back up. So some of the homes must be selling for higher amounts now than what they had been selling for. And then you've got businesses as well. On the last page, you've got the schedule of per capita operating costs. So this is showing, well, what's your average daily attendance? What are your operating expenditures, and then what's it costing the district to run for each pupil? And you can see the average daily attendance has been going up. In 2013, it was 3,464, 3,687 in 2014, and 2015, 3,778. So it's on the rise. You're having more pupils each year for the last several years. And then your estimated operating expenditures per pupil, you kind of just below halfway down the page. You see you're generally in that $8,300 to $8,600 a year cost per pupil. And then when you take into account, the very bottom line takes into account the depreciation, and so in that instance there, you were at $8,286 to run the district per pupil. Any questions about the financial statements? Again, these are a lot of these are numbers that you've seen before, maybe just not in this format. I do have a couple other reports. One, I'm not going to spend too much time on the single audit. The single audit report, if you expend greater than $500,000 of federal money, we have to do special testing on your federal grants. So we did that testing. And last year you had a couple findings related to some of the programs. We checked those again this year, and those findings were not repeated. So there was only one repeat finding, and that had to do with not having a CPA on staff, basically, to prepare the financial statements. And that finding's been there for several years. So nothing new in the way of single audit, except that you did get rid of two of the findings from the prior year. You've improved your processes over maintaining your federal grants. There's a couple of other reports I think you might have that they're in a letter form. They're just stapled. Two of them say communication with those charged with governance. So that's communication letters from our firm to you. And they're very boilerplate in nature. I won't spend much time on them. Just talking about responsibilities of an audit, we are required to give you those letters in writing. And then one of the communication with governance at the end of the audit, it includes the journal entries that were made. So if you take your accounting records and then add any of the adjusting journal entries, you would get the amounts that are in the financial statement. So it's a A plus B equals C kind of methodology. So there's no surprises. Where do these numbers come from? Well, they came from your accounting system plus our entries. So very straightforward. And then the last report that you have from us, I believe, is the management letter. And so while we're out here doing, and this, again, it's just another one that's stapled, it's just a management letter up at the top. That one is a communication from us in writing, just to kind of go over some areas that we spotted when we were out doing the financial statement audit that are not severe deficiencies, but just items that we believe would help. It would help if you took care of some of these items. And I can go through them one by one if you like, or if you might have read ahead and you may have some certain questions about those, I'll kind of leave that up to you. Or I could just kind of touch on, what I just touch on real quickly. One of the areas, first we point out some positive management practices, and I do want to say that the district did a great job of maintaining the books. We got great information from the staff. They did a great job. We got everything we needed to do our audit procedures, and they were able to give it to us while we were out here doing the audit. And from time to time, we're out in an audit client and they don't have everything we need, and it's difficult to leave and then come back and finish your procedures. We did not have to do that here. We were able to get everything we needed in one block of time, if you will. So we really appreciate that. So the opportunities for improvement, briefly, post-employment benefits, that was one of the old GASBs from a few years back that a lot of cash basis school districts did not implement. And it would cost you some money to get some actuarial data that may or may not have any meaning to you. And you chose not to do it, which is fine. Again, a lot of districts have not done that. The capital assets, this has been a finding we've had for several years. The records for capital assets are not as good as they should be, and that's something that, again, this is very common with school districts. It happens at probably half of them. The deficit fund balance, and I think we kind of saw that a little bit earlier in the tort fund, that you were in a negative situation. You're at a negative $1,031,991 at the end of the year. We're just pointing that out. It might be something you want to look into trying to correct. Get that fund out of a deficit situation. Either increase the tax levy for tort immunity, or use some other unrestricted money such as general state aid to supplement the tort fund to bring it out of the deficit. Our next point on page 3 had to do with documentation for key card expenditures. There's a couple instances where all of the receipts weren't there to support the transaction. It got lost somewhere, I don't know, but they weren't there when we were out there to do the audit. We're just saying, gotta try to maintain all those. Our next point about journal entries, we want someone who is not involved in the accounting aspect of the district to kind of review journal entries periodically, make sure that things make sense when entries are being made to the ledger system. On the activity funds, sort of similar to the documentation for expenditures. There were a couple instances where the documentation was not all maintained in one area so that we could see where the money was spent. Lunch sponsor, there was an instance where a claim was filed late. And then on federal grants, we want to see the district develop some internal control procedures related specifically to federal grants. There's a new uniform administrative requirements that's in process, and it's applicable for sure for 2016. And I believe that covers the management letter. Any questions on any of the reports? I know there's a lot there, a lot of new pages to look at, and again, though, basically a recap of things you've seen before.
Overall, in the big picture, are we healthy?
Well, when you say, yeah, well, you've got enough to operate. The majority of your money is in your working cash fund, and so you certainly have resources to tap into if you need them. I would say your fund balance in your ed fund is sort of on the lower side, if you will, when we talk about having 2 months of expenses. I think most districts are 3 months, in that 3 to 6 month range, so you're sort of on the light side there. And then having that tort fund in the negative, you know, that also doesn't bode well for the current financial picture. But I mean, you're maintaining your books correctly, and we did not see anything that was alarming to us, you know, that we would have to come to you with anything, so.
We still rate it in the second highest category from the way that the state scores the schools on finances, the school district financial profile. We had a score of, I think it's 3.35 out of 4, which is in the second highest category. And there's 5 areas that they rate us on. We are doing excellent on all of them that deal with fund balance, because they aggregate a lot of the funds together. So it's not just the ed fund balance they look at, but when you combine it with our hefty working cash balance, they say we're very healthy with fund balance. We got dinged on the fact that we did not have a balanced budget, or the expenses exceeded revenues, and our long-term debt outstanding, as we've known for a long time, we have a heavy principal load for a district this size. So those are the 2 areas that we didn't score perfect on, and it dropped us down into the second highest category, not the highest.
You have to excuse me, I don't have a background in accounting, so
Yeah.
it's overwhelming. It's a terminology.
You're right, there's a lot of accounting specific terms out there and whatnot, but yes, from as Mr. Mon just mentioned, that, you know, the district has resources, and you're in that, they do rate districts across the state, and you're in the, what they call the review category, and that's where you've been the last couple of years, so.
We want to go away to Frankfurt.
I'm sorry?
We want to go away to Frankfurt.
Oh, okay.
Okay, any other questions? Comments? Need a motion to accept the audit report?
So moved.
Second.
Hold on.
This is committee of the whole.
Oh, this is committee.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, there you go.
Motion withdrawn?
I'll take that back.
Yeah.
Take everything.
But, Mr. Myers, thank you for coming out and talking with us, and thank you to all the staff. It was a very smooth audit. I think both your team and our team said everything went great, so it was
Yeah.
a successful year.
Right, yeah, everyone worked well together, so it's a team effort, it really is, so. Thanks for having me out.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Good night.
I have one question for you. How many man hours are involved in man slash woman?
Right,
Personnel.
Human hours.
I'm trying to think back on yours, I'm thinking it was in the 250-ish range.
It's a mix of prelim work on site, 3 to 4 days on site for the audit itself.
We were here for the whole week.
Yeah, and then all the office hours.
Report
after that.
time and, yeah, there's a lot of, there's a lot of time spent on it where we're not actually here within your site, but we're working on reports and various things.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, to the agenda, we get the. Personnel, staffing.
Yep, you see there, we have a couple of resignations there. Sorry, my computer completely crashed in the middle of his report, so I'm trying to get that back up. But yes, there are a mix of, back to the agenda here, just a perfect copy. A few resignations. Please note that with Nettles, with Ms. Nettles at MES, the resignation date is effective, we just got changed today, was it? Yeah. So we will be amending the letter that is in the packet. We have one leave of absence. We are requesting a program assistant at MPC based on student needs there. And then you can see all of the other employments that are there.
Fiscal year 2015 audit, that's the report here.
Yep.
Junior high Chromebook cards.
Mr. Souza has a basic presentation, I believe.
Thank you. Just want to start off with some good news. Our network manager, Freem Baki, he discovered a way to kind of reprogram some of our networking equipment. We're testing it now, about 1 week into testing at Walnut Trails, and it looks like when we get to the point where we would normally come to you asking for a replacement of some hardware, some of this looks like we'll be able to actually just kind of jettison and not replace. So we'll be looking at savings between, I don't know, 8,000 to 12,000 in capital costs when we get to that point in a year or two. So pretty exciting about that. Quick recap of the teacher ease evaluation. We had a group to come together. We looked at 4 different vendors. We narrowed it down to 2 vendors that appear to be better than what we have, but we're going to take a long and slow look at them with a larger group of people, and then ultimately possibly come up with a recommendation in December, depending on the group's opinion and everything else. But that's still a long ways off. Just giving you a quick update. And yeah, let's talk about the junior high Chromebooks. So at the junior high, we have basically 2 types of carts, Chromebook carts and the old netbook carts. The Chromebook carts are highly sought after, and the old netbook carts are reluctantly used, or sometimes not at all. You may ask, are we close to 1-to-1 at the junior high? Short answer is no. We would have to buy an additional 400 devices to get to 1-to-1, even after tonight's proposed purchase. You may ask, how do we compare against other schools in our area, other districts and other schools? We're about middle of the road. If you look at the top one is a junior high, we're somewhere around about 2.4, 2.5 students a device. MIS is little bit better. Troy Middle School, which is a kind of a direct competitor, is at 1.8. Troy Intermediate's at 1.4. Coal City is almost 1-to-1, or practically is. Junior high, if approved tonight, would go down to 1.8 or 1.9 students per device. So we're middle of the road, and we're getting kind of better, but we're not exactly, leading the pack. So you may ask, well, you've got 11 carts right now at the junior high, 11 good carts, if you want to call it that, and you can say, well, isn't that enough? And I would argue that that covers about 35% of the teachers who would use a cart regularly. So if you look at the junior high, at the actual teaching staff, these are all the teachers I quickly kind of come up with that can easily use and justify using a cart in just random Monday or Tuesday or Thursday. So the idea here is finding all these classes could easily use a cart twice a week. So we're not talking about 5, every day, but twice a week. 7 math, 10 language, etc. Comes out to be about 32. So if you look at 11 carts at the junior high, this is a junior high picture, kind of rotated with 4 wings. What does 11 carts look like? Well, if you start putting all these carts into the rooms, this is what 11 carts looks like. So you may notice there's a lot of classrooms without a cart in them. So we're not oversaturating with 11 carts. Tonight's proposals is basically take 11 and bump it up, add 4, bump it up to 15. So we would basically be adding an additional icon in each wing at the junior high. And so even after that, we could tell there'll be still a lot of classrooms without a cart of technology in the class. One of the bigger issues is once you start to have older computers, the older computers would take longer to turn on, they have more bugs, they have more troubleshooting, but the problem then becomes they start to impact the lesson plan. And that's when I believe you have to kind of start taking action. So some teachers at the junior high choose to do an entirely different lesson plan because the quote-unquote good carts are not available to them. And this kind of strikes kind of a nerve with me, is because I personally believe technology should enhance and support and not dictate curriculum. So you may be saying, okay, well, we want to buy more Chromebooks, but how are we being cognizant and courteous to the taxpayer? How are we maximizing this investment? Well, I'm proposing basically 3 different ways that we are. Number 1, we're choosing a low total cost of ownership device. Chromebooks cost somewhere around $265. They're proven, and they get students doing real work and not being prompted to install updates or reboot and restart, and they work all day. Following up on the total cost of ownership, small impact on the technology staff and team. So if we were to add a bunch of Chromebooks, I don't need to come to asking you guys for an additional part-time tech person to help fix and maintain them. They're designed to be low maintenance from the get-go. Reason number 2, we have a strong commitment here to kind of reuse and recycle anything we have. The actual physical laptop carts range from $1,000 to $1,600 a unit. They're pretty expensive. The metal carts with the charging and the locks. Well, we're proposing not buying any. We have 2 carts that are now emptied at one of the elementary schools because they took their laptops out of the cart to better use them in the building and put like 5 in every classroom. So we would take 2 of those carts and ship them to the junior high, and then we would be repurposing 2 of the junior high carts with the quote bad computers, take them out, put the new computers in. So we're not going to buy any carts. You may say, well, what about the units you're replacing? Are you just going to throw them in the dumpster? No. They're slow and old, yes, but if we hardwire them in, basically power and data, we're going to kind of stretch the life out of them as much as we can, either in small areas of the junior high or at some of the elementary buildings. And basically, we just try to maximize the use out of something we own. The last reason is we're choosing 4 carts to be the least amount of money that we can spend, but still have a noticeable impact at the junior high. For example, if we were to purchase 1 cart, it would be nice, but the impact would just not be there, and you could almost question, did it make a difference? So I have a little chart here with the number of carts, the cost, and then impactful, very impactful, transformational. So the idea here is what's the lowest number to get to an impactful status, if you will. So it makes a difference at the junior high, and that was determined to be about 4 carts. So the bottom line, the recommendation is to purchase 128 Chromebooks, 4 carts of 32. due to the class size and expected or projected classroom size growth at, just over 33,000. The junior high administration will be at the regular board meeting. If you have any kind of educational questions for them, they've seen this, but if you have any questions for me, I'm all ears. What we'd like to do.
Would this be a better question for them? What are they using the Chromebooks for in the classroom?
Well, it's a little bit better for them, but basically, all the subjects want to use them, to be honest. Every subject wants, they just kind of rotate. Right now, they kind of schedule them out, rotate around. Math is a big one. Science curriculum now has an online component. Or the Spanish curriculum now has an online component. Obviously, math is heavy with the digits. But then science and social studies as well. The whole gamut. But yeah, they could further do that.
What do they use for social studies? What do they use computer for social studies?
History research projects, but again, that's really a better question for junior high principal, but same kind of concept, different online activities, reports, history reports.
And everything covered in the existing textbooks?
Well, it's,
We're trying to enhance also, like this, you're using real life, if you will, I'm forgetting the name right now, articles, primary documents. They're not all in the current text that we have, and they can research and use those right online and then have something to compare and contrast and to expand their learning as well.
I vaguely remember that back in the spring that we were buying new textbooks. Better off buying new computers.
In the spring,
I think I remember something.
we purchased some social studies for the junior high.
I just,
Oh, I'm sorry.
And Mr. Souza, with the Chromebooks, they're not really designed to run heavy applications at all. They're basically browser-based.
yeah, that's where the strength, if you will, since we're aligned to the Google Apps for School program, they're designed essentially to do that. So for all the collaboration between groups of students for online word processing, spreadsheets. This presentation was made with those tools. Try to use the tools that we're promoting. Yeah, I mean they're designed so they're more or less virus free, blah blah blah. So the device is definitely the clear winner. But in terms of what they're doing inside social studies, exactly, the principal can just speak more to that.
So each of these cards that's out there is used every single day.
Yeah, they have 11 carts and they're checked out all the time. The carts that are not used are essentially quote bad or very old carts, and they're used either reluctantly or not at all. Like I guess I'll finish the project with that, and I just don't want to negatively impact or dictate what a teacher wants to do because they don't have access to a quote unquote good card. That kind of feels like failure. So I want to at least get 4 more in there and it should help carry the load.
At the finance committee on Monday night, one of the teacher representatives there said that, he was one of the people that said, I'll go ahead and check out one of the older carts. How bad can it be? And he said it was a completely lost class period because he spent most of his time going around and trying to help reboot or, troubleshoot, various areas. And he said I would have been better off just changing my lesson for the day.
So how many Chromebooks? 128?
128.
How many are 2 card?
We would be putting 32 on card. 30, normally in other schools you do 30, but the classroom size is kind of approaching that 30, 31 mark. And with new growth, might as well let's get 32 so we have that. So you don't have like 1 student without one.
Are you going to be buying 4 new cards or 2 new cards?
So there's no new physical carts. There's no new, so we're shipping 2
You're
carts.
just using that as a.
It's 128, but it's essentially going to be putting 4 carts on the map. We're not buying any physical carts at
Okay.
12 to 1400 a pop. The physical carts, the actual metal structures on wheels with the charging. I want to get
The
into
old ones are really cards.
Yeah, I'd like to get into the cart building business, to be honest. It seems like a pretty good deal. But just a set.
In terms of the computers that you're repurposing, what are the ones that are on the 4 carts right now?
Well, 2 of them are, 2 carts, yes. So repurposing, so what are they gonna be used for? Well, they currently cannot do the digits program, but they can technically kind of do the Go Math program at the K-5. So if we could put 2 in every classroom, or not every classroom, but, and if we hardwire them in, so we're not running into battery or wireless card performance issues, you know, we're trying to squeak out the best we can. It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing. Since we own it, we might as well just run it into the mud.
Because right now, there's no standard, per se, what type of computer to use in the classrooms. In other words, understand that and say use X, Y, Z.
Correct, yeah, they don't dictate. You know, the only thing actually quote unquote dictating things would be park, you know, and these devices are park compliant, we used them successfully last year. But yeah, the only, so park, yes, other government, no. But this isn't really a park problem or solution. It's just a junior high operational.
Any other questions, comments? Aaron, thank you. Board policy 7.40, third reading.
So, I gave you a ton of documents on this one since it's the third and final time. But we had, the attorney edits, on the policy. I didn't see anything of substance, but there was just a lot of language that they added. So, you have that for your review, and hopefully later tonight your approval, so we can get this policy back in the books.
Finance committee update?
We met Monday night. We did a basic review of revenue and expense reports. Revenue all is in line. Expenses, there were a couple areas that, like health insurance seemed like it was tracking a little higher than I would normally expect at this time of the year, so but we're going to be looking into that. We did a review of the audit and went through a lot of the same things that Mr. Myers talked about tonight. And then we got into a preliminary tax levy discussion that will be part of my superintendent's report tonight.
And transportation?
Transportation met last week, and we spent the time pretty much having Director Hardy give us an overview of the current status of transportation, how many drivers, how many buses, the age of the fleet, mechanics, office staff, all of that. So it was a very informational meeting. We got into a little bit of long-term planning as our fleet is really becoming an older fleet. We have quite a few buses that are over 14 years old. So we got into the discussion that we have to start looking at ways to replace more of the buses. And purchasing may not be the right way for us to go. We may have to look at leasing just so that we can get a bigger quantity of newer buses in. So later this year, we'll be bringing the board and the committee some options and try to do a cost benefit analysis of that.
What is the normal website?
Well, when you lease a bus, these buses can last for 14 years. We have some that are 18 years old that are still, in service every day. So we're making them run. If you get into a leasing program, you rarely have buses that are more than 5 years old, because at the end of the lease, the sales company takes the bus back. They can now resell it to somebody else. And during the time that we have it, it's entirely on warranty, so it should potentially save on supply and repair costs. And the state allows you to claim depreciation for only 5 years. So there's a lot of benefits to only keeping the buses for 5 years. When you purchase buses, obviously it's just not practical to renew your entire fleet every 5 years. But under a leasing program, you might be able to do it.
How does that affect reimbursement?
Fully reimbursable. Your lease cost is completely reimbursable.
So there's no percentage?
It's the total cost of the lease straight lined over 5 years. Straight line depreciation is what they give you, so that's what you get to claim each year. But in general, the entire cost of the lease is claimable on the state. Now with the state formula, they cut down the percentage. They prorated, but they're prorating everything now.
So what's the prorated percentage?
We have not finalized transportation yet. We don't expect them to give us a percentage until December.
Is it the same purchase versus lease?
Yes. No, there's no difference in the percentage on that. They still go in as allowable costs, and then they prorate a percent of the allowable costs. Yeah, Mr. Kevin Smith is now our Director of Buildings and Grounds. Obviously, our former director, Mr. Blair, who had been with the district for quite some time, retired on October 8th, I think it was. So we wish him well in retirement, and we all know that we'll be seeing Mr. Blair quite often, you know, in the community and in the district, I'm sure. But Mr. Smith is still kind of getting his feet wet, and he's you know, learning and doing his best to kind of shift his mindset into the management of staff and you know, management of processes. So he's kind of going through a whirlwind time right now, but all the buildings seem to be still running in good condition. We're slowly making the conversion from you know, cooling to heating. So that's always a tenuous time of the year, because we could have a 50-degree day, and so now we turn the heat on, and then, you know, 2 days later we get back up in the 70s, and you know, cooling is the desired function. So, one update for operations and maintenance, they're going to be recommending to the board in November that we donate the blue van. The fire department said that they would take it for training purposes, but this is like really almost a 20-year-old van that is really just collecting dust for us right now. We haven't been using it for a little while, so it'll come to you as a disposal of surplus product in November.
Technology.
I think he kind of incorporated that into the beginning of the Chromebook. Yeah, I'm going to make the recommendation that we, unless it's an extenuating circumstance that needs action at the regular meeting, that because we have audience members that are starting to join us, that we not often go into closed session at the end of the committee of the whole. That way, we don't have to have the entire audience leave and then come back in. So we will try to be kind to the people that come to participate. So we do have an executive session topics, but nothing that needs immediate action, and we can wait for the regular.
So moved.